Well, welcome everyone to all the millions of viewers who are coming on board. I hope you've noticed I've tried to put a t-shirt on tonight that might look a little bit more clerical, just to give me authority, because I'm with two really good people and I need to have authority. Steve, many of you will know, who come read my blog. Steve's been a mate for 30 plus years, I guess, when we were both quite young back in the day. And Michele, we first met in 2011, end of 11, beginning of 12. And you know Michele, those who come on my site, because she has been on a number of Zooms before. So here we go. I'm going to talk to them really about the nature of story and their interest in story. So let me kick off, Steve, with you. Well, let me go straight for it. You got a quote at the end of your email that often pops up. I cannot remember the author. You might not either. What's the quote? Why did you put it there?
The quote is, I think it's Robert McGee, who once said that the strongest cultural force at work is the power of story. And I think for me, Martin, when a couple of decades ago, I took to the road, literally, walked out of the prayer meeting and began to carry prayer across the land. One thing you discover when you're out walking all day is that your prayers quickly run out. And I began to realize that so much more powerful than our words was actually the story of our lives, and letting the story of our lives begin to speak both to the heavens and to the land. And so that kicked me off on a journey, really, of just a passion to see these stories of just ordinary folk like us find some legs, I suppose. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
So I'm going to come back to you in a moment, and I'm going to put this to Michele first. You said our story is kind of really important, and I can't remember, but you're indicating the story of us. Who are we? Well, we're pretty close to being nobodies, but you said they're really important. I want to come to Michele, and then I'll come back to you, Steve. Michele, for you, listening to Steve and where he was going there, how important do you think it is to have what I would call the big stories? You know, I'm a world famous evangelist. I get up and have breakfast. Before I do that, I've led 35 people to Christ in the restaurant. I raised the dead on the street outside, and then. And you read that and you go, wow. How important are those kind of stories?
Well, I'm going to maybe say something a little bit controversial. I don't know. But I think there's a difference between story and PR. And storytelling goes deeper than your credentials. It goes deeper than your exploits. It looks at, in my understanding, it looks at the entire narrative around which you frame your world. And I think those are surface level stories, but there are much deeper, more important worldview shaping stories that that really defines not just our own individual kind of journeys, but even as Steve was saying, our cultural journeys and the cultural narratives that shape not just our own lives, but our cultures, our organizations, and all the way on up to society and global levels. And to just as an example, I wasn't tuned into the whole story thing until I lived in Africa for 7 years. And the entire culture around that I was living in, if you wanted to communicate a major point, it wasn't like you would just, line out our outline and be very linear like we are in the West. It was, you needed to find the right story to frame it in. And you told a story to be able to be the capsule for the communication, or the container for the communication. And I just think that goes on right on down to the depths of even who Jesus is and kind of the crux of our faith.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Steve, just coming back to you, unless you want to comment on that, but coming back to you, my illustration of the big story, the powerful, and it's always or nearly always a man of God. And you walk out prayer, walk off the map, and words carry you so far, but you still have a story. Just ask you first of all, do you value or have you valued? Have you valued past tense? Do you still value what I would call the supersonic Christian story, the biography that really might be PR, but it's in there? Did you value it past tense, and do you read them? How do you relate to them?
Yeah, I mean, like us all, Martin, it's a constant daily challenge for me to keep my heart clear of cynicism. And I do genuinely believe there is a high road and there's a low road, and not just in the song. And some of us are graced for the high road, that it's visible and immediate, and some of us have a different road to travel where there is a depth to it. And mystery and not knowing and all those things we struggle with in the West, as you were saying, Michele, come right before us, because you have to journey through space where we haven't given any time or room for mythology. We haven't given any time for lingering in the place of not knowing and being comfortable with that. And realizing sometimes that our language runs out. There isn't the language enough to give our story that surface expression that we've become so used to. So, yeah, I do value that, Martin, and I need that. I need to be taken to those higher levels, but not at the expense of some of the mystery and the.
Can I push you one step further, Steve? Mystery. What about, I got out of bed before breakfast, I fell over and 3 expletives came out of my mouth, and I felt I really failed. And that's how I started my day. So not just a kind of low road, but hey, that's how I am kind of story. Is there value in that, or does that sow into cynicism and not pull us higher? You follow? I mean, you said you value those stories. What ones pull you higher? What about the stories that really let it all hang out, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, decades ago, I do remember when I used to do that preachy thing. I once said there needs to be more swearing in the church. What I was really saying is there needs to be more reality. We all listen to real stories, don't we? Where the pain that we all carry, we can, going back to Job's mates, they sat with him for 40 days in silence, didn't they? Now it's a shame they didn't go a bit longer, because what they then had to say wasn't that helpful.
Yeah.
But there is something very powerful about that, isn't there? And sometimes just the reality that brings is like, it's a breath of fresh air. We so need that, for sure.
Just before I come back to Michele, so I mean, you're kind of saying, if I hear you right, we need stuff to pull us higher, even if there's a bit of PR in there, and tell us the other side of your life, which doesn't tend to come out in those biographies. And we need the other stuff, more swearing in the church, as you refer to it. Is there a way that you can hold those together? Going back to your original quote, the greatest cultural change is that of story. Is there a way that you hold those two? Because they're quite opposite, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh man, I hope so. I sincerely hope so, because we need the signs and wonders of the heavens, but we also need those that are to come up from the ground, from the very, the filth and the dirt and the earth itself. And so I hope there's grace, but maybe we're in the early days of discovering that one, Martin.
Yeah,
I hope so, mate, for sure.
Michele, some of those stories, I'm just calling them big stories for a moment, grandiose stories. You said PR, but also, I know you're involved in business as well, advertising world. So I'm just deviating a little bit from story here. How do you present yourself? Not you, how do you present yourself? But how should a believer present themselves? You know, I have this incredible product. I'm the best in the world at it, or woe is me, I am but a worm, so I wouldn't buy from me if I were you, and end up going bankrupt. That's not quite a story, but it is to do with how we present ourselves. How would you, what would you suggest?
It absolutely is. And to clarify to the point that I was sharing before, when I talk about the PR aspect of it, I think we don't have to look very far to see how Christian celebrity has built a subculture that is self-perpetuating in a narrative that really, maybe there are great things happening because God honors the hunger of people that show up, but it doesn't necessarily build a system or anything that is closer to Jesus, and oftentimes doesn't look anything like him when we break it down. But transitioning into this, I would say it's about how do you connect with people. Stories are vehicles of connection, and you can tell there can be the same instance in the way that you shape and that you tell the story. Quite honestly, you highlight different things based on what audience you're talking to. And I think that there's a way to be able to put forth expertise and put forth your credentials that are verifiable and that have been out there, especially in the business realm, and that show that you're good at what you do without it being something that, excuse me, he has an opinion too, evidently. And without it being something that kind of goes over the top where it feels very hype. And I think maybe even more so than PR, hype is probably a better term, is that there can be this hype around things that it's like, if we're just real and we tell the stories that we've got and we share our experiences and we're honest about them, we're honest about our struggles, we're honest about the things that we did that worked really well, we're honest about the mystery and the things we don't understand, and we put that out there, that's what draws people in. Case in point, I have a newsletter and I was writing the standard business marketing style stuff that you write in business, and I hated writing it. It really wasn't me. I didn't like it at all. So a couple of months ago, I just wrote my list and said, hey, I'm not writing that anymore. I'm just going to tell you stories. I'm just going to write the stories of the struggles and the joys and the things that happen every day in my life. And if you like reading them, stick around. And if not, hey, find things that you want to put your attention on. And it's blown up in terms of people wanting to hear more, because I think we all want that reality to be able to anchor a relationship in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Steve, maybe I'll just home in on, we'll wind this little session down. I did a series recently, writing series on issues of sexuality, same-sex, transgender, etc. And in kind of doing some reading behind what I wrote, I realized there are, of course, a million stories out there that can be pulled in to prove. I can find stories that prove I'm right. And somebody who has a total opposing view can pull in stories that, no, you're wrong, because listen to these stories. And both stories are probably really genuine. Have you wrestled with how do we present story when, I suppose, we can colonize our own story to prove that we're right, or we pull in somebody else's story that defends our position? I don't know if I've made that clear, but that's, I think I'm wrestling with personally, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, for me, each of our stories carries the highest of tariffs, doesn't it? I mean, there is nothing more precious than your story or my story or the story of our next door neighbours. They are what they are, and they speak of what they speak. And if Jesus was and is the custodian of our stories, then how would he treat them, and who are we to do differently?
Yeah.
Other than with the utmost care, and the utmost respect. I mean, I remember when we walked down into Cairo, and we carried with us not just our own stories, but a literal book of true life stories. And one of the team just said, "Steve, I feel we need to go and throw this into the River Nile." And we stood on the bridge and threw it in and called for stories to rise. And not many months later, the Arab Spring broke forth.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying that one led to the other, of course not, but there was something about what rose in the Arab Spring.
Yeah.
There was an authenticity to the stories there that we have to listen to, and we have to learn to listen to that which is coming up from the streets.
Yeah.
And it's a discipline to be silent. It's a discipline to allow others and to give others voice. But maybe for someone who used to, preach and all that stuff, maybe it's a good discipline for someone like myself to embrace, the place of silence and respect for, the story that may not necessarily confirm mine, but is nevertheless totally and utterly legitimate.
Brilliant. Hey guys, I'm going to just suggest we take a break. We'll come back in a few minutes and roll out another little one. So to you and to the viewers, we say we're just going to take a pause.